We'll look at all the debates on, when I was a kid, they said 4 ice ages. Then it was 9 ice ages. Now they're currently at 31 ice ages. Tomorrow we're going to look at how one flood produced a single ice age. Very, very important and interesting topic. So that's 8:30 in the morning. And Sunday morning worship, last time I was here, I did prove that the Bible is a supernatural word of God. So if you remember, I took medical laws that were in the Bible. I showed medicine that Moses would have learned, compared it to the medical laws in the Bible, showed that they only could have come from God. So I did the prove the Bible last time. This time I'm going to take the 3 most attacked stories in the Bible, and I'm going to prove they happened. Each one only takes about 8 or 9 minutes to prove it happened. But Sodom and Gomorrah, oh, come on, they say, that was only made to scare people. Don't be ridiculous. Jericho, oh, Catherine Kenyon proved in the 1950s it didn't happen, and she was a top archaeologist. We're going to see what's wrong with all that stuff tomorrow. David and Goliath, 2 guys in the field. One guy was a giant. Come on, didn't happen. Tomorrow morning, church, 10 o'clock, we're going to prove Sodom and Gomorrah really happened, Jericho happened, and David and Goliath happened. So today, Dinosaurs 4D. Starting with the Bible, God says, so God created the great creatures of the sea according to their kinds. Every winged bird according to its kind. God saw that it was good. Notice, God made every winged bird according to its kind. Drastically different than what kids learn at public school. God saw that it was good. God made the wild animals according to their kind. The livestock according to their kind. All the creatures that move along the ground according to their kind. If your mother says, and the pastor's wife is gone, so you guys better get your rooms clean before she comes back.
No.
Yes! Oh, yes!
No. No.
It's a rough crowd in this front aisle here, Pastor. Whose children are these? If your mother said to you, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room 10 times, she means clean your room, right? God says, okay, listen up. God says 10 times, I created according to their kind, according to their kind, according to their kind. Very important concept. If you could get that down, you could deal with like 90% of the stuff that's coming at you. You can have big dogs, small dogs, hairy dogs, hairless dog, but the dog will never go into the water and change into a dolphin or a porpoise. That is taught in every school in America, that a dog changed into a dolphin or porpoise, and it's not true. And it's not just science classes, it's lit classes. Go write a paper on how a dog changed into a dolphin or porpoise. And it's not true. Biggest one they're pushing today is the mosquitoes that went down into the subways in the 1950s. They stayed there. When the humans left in the bombing of, 1940s rather, in the bombing in London, the mosquitoes stayed there. And now the mosquitoes can't have interaction with the mosquitoes on the top in a physical way. And so they say, oh, that's evolution, that's evolution. No, it's a mosquito that changed into a mosquito. It's the mosquito kind, okay? So the dogs won't become dolphins or porpoises. The first D I want you to remember is design. Let's say design. God did what? He designed the dinosaurs. God did what? He designed the dinosaurs. Okay. You see design in air animals, and when you look at these guys, they are so big. That's a Quetzalcoatlus next to a guy. He's so big that if you measured his wingspan, that's 48 feet in his wingspan. That's the biggest one found in the United States down in Texas. If he put out his wing here, he'd touch that window over there. Put out his wing here, he'd touch that window over there. That's how big they were. They were huge. They're actually as big as jet fighters. Now, when we have our jet fighters make a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn, that motion in a fighter jet is so complex that the computers could kick in to help it make the turn. Here's what's amazing. These guys were so big and they were so complex. Literally, their wings are the thickness of a piece of paper. And within the thickness of a piece of paper is about 5 different layers. One of the layers has literally millions and millions of microscopic sensors. It shoves the information so fast, you barely could even conceive of how fast it's going, into their brains, and their brains process it and send it back out so they can make that right turn or left turn. Their brains are doing what our huge computers are doing, and they're actually doing it faster and better. Design in Triceratops, you see this all over the place. We have a Triceratops skull in our museum. It's 6 feet, it weighs 450 pounds, and it's a kid head. Just the head of a kid, 450 pounds. The adult males would have about a 10-foot skull, about 1,000 pounds, and if you took a full yellow school bus, jammed a car on for the front, you pretty much have the size of a Triceratops. They got horns like a buffalo. They didn't come from buffalo. They got a nose like a rhino. They didn't come from rhinos. They got a beak, and indeed this is called a beak, just like a turtle. They didn't come from turtles. God said he created them according to their kind. Now, if you got a body the size of a school bus, how much are you eating? 1,000 pounds a day they're eating of plant material. So, hey, you go down to McDonald's, you walk up to the counter and you go, I want 1,000 pounds of hamburgers. Be prepared for them to fill the whole front area where everybody sits at the table to the ceiling with hamburgers. Before the flood, the trees were so big, the ferns were at about 20 feet. I have the stem of a fern in our museum. It's this thick. It's a fern stem. So the plant material is huge. So they got to have chewing machines. Now, kids, how many of you know what a hand saw is? Hand saw? Yep. If you took 4 hand saws and faced them down and 4 hand saws and faced them up, that's basically the right-hand side of the mouth. 4 hand saws facing down, 4 hand saws facing up, that's the left-hand side of the mouth. So, I mean, these things are chewing machines. Anybody like horses in here? Horses are awesome, right? This is the coolest part of the Triceratops, I think. This is one Triceratops leg. And if you look just at this section right here, and you compared that to a horse's leg, this is the same quantity of bones in a full leg of a horse, and it's the same shape of the bones as a full leg of a horse. So that's 4 horse legs worth of bones just in the bottom of a single Triceratops leg. So is this something like simple, trying so hard to become complex? No. It is phenomenally complex. Now let me ask you guys a question. How many of you think Pastor Derek can outrun a Triceratops? Raise your hand. There's a wee little bit of faith in this room, Pastor Derek. He actually could. If he took a lot of sharp turns. If he went straight, he would be cooked. How'd they die? Picture in your mind 10,000 grazing school buses. You got that? Spread them out across the fields of Battle Lake. There they are. Genesis 7:11 says, on the same day the fountains of the great deep ripped apart, the crust of the earth ripped apart, the sediment was blasting out and covered them amazingly quick. I see design in the long necks. If I was hunting this guy, I'd be about this big. Shoot him in the knee. All right, look at the size of his heart. That's how big his heart is. That heart's so big you could climb in there and get shot out of one of those valves. Right? That's a new water park design, a sauropod long neck heart. This is a kid sauropod, a kid long neck. They're actually so small when they're babies that they could actually fit in an egg smaller than a basketball. But when they're full grown, they never stop growing. They grow their whole life. And kids, if we grew our whole life, you'd be like through the ceiling. We stopped growing, and that's probably a good thing. They never stopped growing, that's why they got to be so big. If you took a herd of brachiosaurs and you dropped a 2-story house in it, that's what it would look like. These guys are big. Seismosaurus is the longest at 150 feet long. He is longer than 3 school buses end to end. Here is the heaviest one, Argentosaurus. Now a little bit debate. Brand new bunch of dinosaurs coming out called the Dreadnoughts, which means fear nothing. And they're even bigger than this, but they only got like a femur that's like this big. They don't have full bodies, so they haven't really taken the stage yet. But Argentosaurus is so heavy at 80 tons you could barely fit him in a picture. Here's 30 people standing in front of the Seismosaurus. Notice the length of their tail. Notice the length of their neck. Their tails are as long as today's bridges. Their necks are as long as today's bridges. Now, every single bridge that you have ever driven over, every single one of them was designed. What's amazing is their necks, their tails are designed better than today's bridges because they can move any which way they possibly want to. Our bridges can't do that. God actually designed their necks and tails better than today's bridges. Kids, reach behind your neck, feel the neck vertebrae in the back of the bone in the back of your neck there. Your neck vertebrae is this big, that's their neck vertebrae. That's a neck vertebrae. Now, if you took your handsaw and you cut the neck vertebrae right in half, they would be very, very hollow inside. Now, in public school, they make a big deal out of this. This is what they say. Well, students, they say, dinosaurs have hollow bones. And birds have hollow bones. So obviously, dinosaurs must have evolved into birds because they both have hollow bones. Now, why do birds have hollow bones? They fly, right? Well, obviously, these guys got hollow bones because they're flying, right? No. They have hollow bones for a totally different reason. If you've got a neck that's 50 feet long with a rock-solid head at the end and a rock-solid neck, you're never picking up your head or your neck. If you got a T-Rex skull at 6 feet and it's rock-solid, you're never picking it up. Mammoth skull, 8 feet. We got a mastodon skull at our museum with an 8-foot brain case. You're not going to ever pick it up. God made them light, hollow, super strong, so that they could deal with the sizes. Has nothing to do with flying at all. They're just huge. That's why God made them hollow inside. Now, their teeth are actually designed. Like every single thing about these guys is designed. Man, if you got to eat 1,000 pounds of vegetation a day, you got a challenge ahead of you. If we dropped you guys off in McDonald's and the whole entryway, front all the way to the counter was full of hamburgers to the ceiling, you'd have a hard time eating all of that. God specifically designed their teeth to consume vast quantities of stuff. So their teeth are not designed to chew. That's not the purpose of their teeth. Their teeth are to act like a giant rake. Literally, stand in the middle of the forest with the 20-foot ferns, rake in the plant material as fast as they can go. Some of their teeth look like sharpened spoons, again, not to chew, but to just rake the plant material in. Some of their teeth are designed like snow shovels. This is like the Minnesota, Maine dinosaur right here, because we're always got snow shovels, right? Shovel that food in as fast as it could go. Well, if it's not chewing with its teeth, if it's just using it like a giant rake, how is it chewing the material? That is what is totally amazing. God made their necks. Now remember, you're looking at a 30-foot neck. So muscular that literally they rake the plant material in with their teeth and they literally chew with their necks and they crunch it all the way down their neck. I mean, that is a plant-eating machine that you're looking at right there. Now, what if a T-Rex came after this guy? What would happen? Nothing. He's got a 2,000-pound tail. Could you imagine getting hit by a 2,000-pound baseball bat? T-Rex falls on the ground. Oh, I got my little arms. I can't get up. I can't get up. He wouldn't have a problem with T-Rex. Oh, look at these cute things. They're awesome, man. If you went fishing for them, that's how you'd bring it home. These guys are big. In fact, they're so big, their eyes are about this big. Now, how many of you kids have looked through a microscope? Raise your hand. How many of you kids have looked through a telescope? Raise your hand. Now, what's the difference? Once he's far away, right? Once he's up close. But what's the real difference? The real difference is the shape of the glass lens inside of it. Now, we have a lens in our eye. All of us do. We have a lens in each eye. We cannot change the shape of the lens in our eye. They actually had a ring around the outside of their eye, and they could compress it, and they could change the shape of the lens in their eye. See far away, see up close, totally amazing. Kids, you got a set of ribs right here, these bony things in your chest, those are called ribs. You got one set here, you got one set here. And when you guys go in the lake, how many of you ever do you challenge your dad, like, I can hold my breath longer than you, Dad. And you go under the water, you're holding your breath. And you could hold your breath like 30 seconds, right? These guys had an extra set of ribs. They didn't have just two, they had three. They had one in the middle. They could compress the air in so tight they could stay underwater till tomorrow morning time to go to church. Not just 30 seconds. They could stay underwater just about a whole day. Totally amazing. Now, in Nevada, there was 30 of them swimming. They're 50 feet long, and they're swimming north to south, and they're fossilized like this. I mean, just rapidly like this. Did dinosaurs evolve into birds? Now, remember what the verse said? God said, I created every winged bird according to its kind. Guys, they took the dino birds that you've been hearing about for years, and they decided to CAT scan them. Now, the first dino bird that came out was Archaeoraptor. It was a multi-million-dollar release. 4 months before it came out, it was CAT scanned by the University of Texas, and they were shocked to discover it was actually made of 88 different pieces of stone and bone, giving new meaning to the words made in China. Now, when you never see these things like kids, have you ever seen a picture of these dino birds in the ground, actually in stone? Like right there laying there? No, not in the ground. But every important fossil you ever dig up, you always take a picture of it. I've taken out about 500 dinosaur footprints in the Connecticut River Valley. I found one that wasn't allowed to be there, according to the evolutionary time frame, because I don't believe in those millions of years. But first thing I did was I took pictures. You never see these in the ground. Why not? Now we know they're all coming off the same factory line. Let's look at Confucius ornis. Confucius ornis was so bad, when they actually allowed it to be CAT scanned, there was a thick layer of grout that glued it all together, air bubbles, separation joints, little pieces of metal that came off the file. This is in every textbook in America, and it was totally fake. And so what they did was they got nervous because they're not seeing them in ground in situ. They're all coming from the same factory, and it's not good. When they CAT scanned them, they started to panic. They assembled a team led by Dr. Alan Fiducia, diehard evolutionist, bird expert. Everybody in the team was an evolutionist. Everybody in the team was considered a bird expert. They did not find a true feather in any of them. Basically what happened was the dinosaur died. The skin was decomposing. They saw straight lines in the fossil. They determined that those straight lines were actually fossilized collagen fibers. They were not developing feathers. Every single dino bird swept apart in one swift motion. I was at the show in Denver with my wife, one of the two big shows, and I walked up to the dino bird table. Originally, 85 grand for Archaeoraptor. Now you could get a dino bird for $2 grand. I walk up to the table, I was stunned. There was like 11 dino birds laying there. Every single one of them was the same way. The head the same direction, the wings the same way, every one of them. So I said to the Chinese gentleman selling the dino birds, I said, man, how'd you get all 11 of these to die in the same manner? Just kind of hold a pose, you know? They're fake. And now they're warning on all of the websites. Don't buy stuff from China. It's fake. So yeah, the dino birds are pretty much gone. Design in humans. Now, God designs awesome stuff, but the best part of what God designed in the whole universe was us. All the rest of it, he designed just for us. Now, kids, when you are in your mom's tummy, you look like this. I'm serious. And then a couple of weeks go by, and then you look like kind of like a, let's get over here. You look kind of like a hot dog bun. Then something comes up right at the top. What do you think it is? Oh, it's not the head. It's just the brain. Not the head yet. The bone hasn't formed around it, just the brain hanging out there all alone. Must be a male. No, I'm kidding. I didn't say that. Okay. Then all of a sudden, you get 2 arms, 2 legs. Guys, for you to go from this to you takes millions of unbelievable things that all have to happen in exactly the same order. It is a miracle from God. You're the best part of what God designed. How many of you got washers, dryers, and refrigerators at home? Okay, now look. You take off the back of the washer, dryer, refrigerator. Don't do this by yourself, because if you do it by yourself, you get electrocuted and die. Okay, don't do that. You got to do it with mom or dad, grandma or grandpa. And when you look inside of there, you're going to see these wires. And they come from like different places. And where they meet, we call those electrical connections. Now this is amazing. And it's true, if you added up all of the electrical connections from all of the washers, dryers, and refrigerators in the whole world, you added up those electrical connections. Your single human brain has more electrical connections in it than all the washers, dryers, and refrigerators in the entire world put together. That's amazing. And you didn't get that from eating red meat, which is what they say. That's ridiculous. And lions would rule the world. But yeah, incredible design. You guys like to run, right? I see you running all the time. You run, you cut your knee. Here's what happens. 14 chemical things happen right in a row. Boom, 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 boom. You can't have just 5 of those things waiting for the 6th one to develop to stop you from bleeding. You have to have all 14 things in a row lined up immediately there from the beginning, or there'd be no life at all. It's designed. I've had a lot of tumors, and the one surgery, they're taking me from the gurney, they're putting me on the surgical table. And the surgeon, I'm very vocal when I talk with people. I bring bones into the doctor. And the surgeon says to the entire surgical team, he says, Paul used to believe in evolution, but he doesn't believe in evolution anymore. He believes in creation. With that, I sit up, right? I'm on the table. I sit up. I go, yeah, when you cut into me, if I didn't have those 14 chemical steps for blood clotting, I would die, and all of you know it. And I'll tell you, if you got only 5 of those steps evolved, you're all dying. You got to have all 14 intact. I'm just about to get to the discussion about God, and the anesthesiologist put me out for the count. I didn't even tell me to lay down. I'm just like, I woke up. I'm like, wasn't I talking about something? Yeah, kids, all of it intact, totally, totally amazing. Lost my clicker. How do I do these things? Here's the clicker. All right, so here's the coolest part of you, though. You know, it's great to have blood clotting. And it's great to have hair. I wish I had a little more. And it's great to have this unbelievable brain. But guys, you know what the best part is? This is what's amazing. It makes you distinct from the animals. God says, I made you in my image. Whoa! That's huge. That means you can love God and receive love from God. That means you have an eternal soul. Listen, tomorrow morning, you're going to get up. A lot of you guys are going to come to church to hear the Mammoth program at 8:30. And then your dog's going to like walk up there and go, yeah, you know what? I want to go to church. I want to worship the Lord. No, doesn't happen. We are the only one. We're distinct. We're made in the image of God. We can have a personal relationship with God. It's awesome. Sets us apart from the animals. Pastor Derek, what's the first D? It always helps when I put it on the screen, right? God designed the dinosaurs. Next one is disobey. Let's say design, disobey. Design, disobey. Design, disobey. Design, disobey. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you ever disobey your parents? Yes. What? I can't believe it. Not the kids in Battle Lake. I have heard they are the most awesome kids in the whole planet. You guys disobey. You're not. There's a little debate going on in front row. Let me ask you another question. How many of you fight with your brothers or sisters? No! How many of you fight with your brothers and sisters? Yeah, and guys, look up here. That's what we call sin. And all of us sin, and it puts a giant wall between us and God. And when Adam and Eve sinned, it was sad. And all this kind of stuff came into the world. Death came into the world. Disease came into the world. And you see it all with the dinosaurs too. This is a snake. This fossil is amazing. This is a snake in the middle of a nest of dinosaur eggs. One of the dinosaurs had hatched, and the snake was going to bite it, and right before it bit it, fossilized, just like that. Crusts the earth, rips apart, fountains of the great deep explode on the same day, takes it out. Hadrosaurs are some of the most collectible dinosaurs because we have the largest quantity of bones. This is a head, and this particular hadrosaur got bit by a T-Rex but got away. Now, why do these animals have such big teeth? I get asked that all the time, because when you read the Bible, it actually says something that makes you believe something differently. It says, to all the beasts of the earth, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. What? They were meant to eat plants? Well, when you look at their teeth, there's two fish. One's called a piranha, one's called a pacu, and one eats people and flesh, and one eats plants. Now, when you look at these teeth, is that the one that eats the people or the plants? That's actually the pacu that eats the plants. And the one that eats the people has the same exact teeth. You can't tell anything from their teeth. This Kia bird in New Zealand has very sharp claws. And initially, it would take like different kind of nuts that fell off the tree, and they take those sharp claws and rip them open and eat the inside of the nut. And then sheep got brought to New Zealand, and when the sheep died, these birds started eating dead sheep, and they actually switched from plant eaters to meat eaters. You cannot tell anything from the teeth or claw. Plant eater or meat eater, biggest claw ever found on a dinosaur, that is a plant eater. All right, you can't tell anything from the claws. Well, what about T-Rex? Well, just about every single thing you've been told about T-Rex has been proven to not be true. First Jurassic Park movie, those babies are moving so fast they're chasing down Jeeps, right? Fourth Jurassic Park movie, I dragged my girls in their 20s with me to see them. We're driving home, and I go, so what'd you think of the movie? It was awesome. I'm like, it was great. They're like, Dad, the woman in the movie is in high heels outrunning the Triceratops. No, the T-Rex, the T-Rex. I'm like, I didn't even notice that. Like, how do women notice those things? I didn't even notice that. I'm watching a dinosaur. I don't know how I'm watching her run in her high heel. They did studies on their legs, and they actually plod along very slowly. What? Yeah. We only got 12 decent skeletons of T-Rexes. We got tens of thousands of plant eaters. We took a skull, a T-Rex skull, filled the brain cavity with resin, and made a replica of its brain. It's about this big. They won't let me take anything flying anymore because if they can't x-ray it, they take it away from you. So the T-Rex brain's about this big. Now, for an animal with a 48-foot body, that's a very tiny brain. When you study the brain, all it can do is smell. So what is the purpose of this giant dinosaur that goes very slowly and smells like crazy, but like can't do 2 + 2? No way. When sin comes into the world, death comes into the world. And you can't leave dead stuff laying around all over the place. So, like, you know what a vulture is, right? Vulture sees dead stuff, swoops down. God designed its body to actually consume death, to physically handle eating death. But a vulture can't handle a 100-foot dinosaur. So basically all T-Rex is a glorified vulture. Sniffs out death from long distances, plods along very slowly, and consumes death. And they are very rare. Now originally, when God said, I meant all these animals to eat plants, the reason we can't understand their big teeth is oftentimes we don't actually understand the plants. The new displays out west, they always put these things in there called a cycad. That's what they look like fossilized. Today they look like this, but they're much, much smaller. And the fossilized ones are about this big. And if you took a pineapple that was this big, and you kind of encased the pineapple in a shell, like a coconut shell, so you cross the pineapple and coconut and make it this big, that's the plants they were eating. So what kind of teeth do you need to have to eat a coconut / pineapple this big? You need really big teeth. And so they were actually designed to eat the plants that were there when they were alive. And then after sin and death comes into the world, they're sniffing out death and they're getting rid of it. Never ruled the planet. Totally ridiculous. Design, disobey. Let's say that. Design, disobey. Design, disobey. Design, disobey. Now, God looks down on all of the violence that's happening, both with men and women. You read in the Bible right away about brother fighting with brother. You see massive violence in the fossil record. When he looks down, do you think he's happy with that? No. God actually tells us what he thought. He says the earth was corrupt in God's sight. Kids, the word corrupt is a big word. It means messed up. The world was messed up. And he sends the third D, disaster. Design, disobey, disaster. Let's say it. Design, disobey, disaster. Design, disobey, disaster. Design, disobey, disaster. So, springs into the great deep burst forth. The floodgates of the heavens were opened. And the flood lays down layers after layers after layers. Now, we talked about this last time I was here. And if you haven't seen this, this is the most important picture. The layers go for 277 miles in the Grand Canyon. They are dead straight. If you're at the bottom, they're dead straight. How far is Minneapolis from here? Less than 200 miles, right? Yeah, so it's past Minneapolis, dead straight. The bottom's dead straight. The middle's dead straight, the top's dead straight. So here's your two choices. Evolution says time laid down the layers. Millions of years of mountains and valleys and streams, chemical weathering, water weathering, millions more years of mountains, valleys, and streams. Then it's an ocean for millions of years in the red wall limestone. Then it's a desert for millions of years in the Coconino, and tens of millions or more years of mountains, valleys, and streams, which would look like what? Which would look like this. On every single layer, all the way up. I mean, you could get a mile deep in there. I rafted it, took me 8 days. It's a mile deep. Every straight layer. Here's your second option, which you're never allowed to hear about in school. Worldwide supernatural flood laid out dead straight layer, stacked on top of dead straight layer, like giant pancakes that go for hundreds of miles. When you look at that picture, you do not see this. You see this. And you know what's great about that? Every single debate I've ever had with anybody, you can see the flood in that picture. You do not see weathering at all anywhere in that picture. And so kids, that's over some of your heads, but I needed the parents to understand that the flood really happened. So what do we got so far? Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Let's say it. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Now, I want you guys tomorrow to go up to the pastor, and I want you to say, design, disobey, disaster, deliver. You know what he's going to do? He's going to say them backwards to you. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. He's going to know them so well, he's going to say them backwards, okay? So you try it, check him out. He's got it down. He's ready to go. He's a smart guy. You got one of the best pastors I know. I just want to tell you that. You did really good. So, no, I've seen a lot of pastors. He's not a ding-a-ling, trust me. So anyways, by faith, God tells Noah, Noah, I want you to build a huge ship. And the Bible says that Noah built the huge ship. Now, there's huge debate about this. Oh, come on. How could he build a wooden boat that big? That's what people say to me all the time. How could he build a wooden boat that big? I want to tell you about a guy named Emperor Caligula. Why is Emperor Caligula eating breakfast with a horse? Very good question. Emperor Caligula was missing a couple things in his brain. So Emperor Caligula made his horse his top advisor. Okay? He made his horse the high priest of his false religion. All right? He ate with his horse. Okay, now listen. That's the beginning of the first Mr. Ed movie right there. He was crazy, but he built big stuff. In this lake called Lake Nemi, 20 miles north of Rome, they saw underneath the water some pretty incredible ships. Now, the reason the ships are under the water is because this guy was so nuts that the Senate actually voted to expel him from the history books. And there's a certain Italian word for it, and it basically means destroy every statue, demolish every reference to him, and destroy everything he ever built. So they actually sunk his boats. So how big were the boats? Really big. They were so big they had to drain part of the lake to get to them. It's called the Lake Nemi ships. They pulled 2 of them out, and after they drained part of the lake, and built a giant museum. And during World War II, and it was all part of, the leader of Italy saying, I'm a great guy, I'm almost as good as Hitler, and all this. Hitler was a bad guy, okay? But they were on the same side. And so he wanted to make a glorious, remembrance of the greatness of who they were. So they really spent a lot of money on these ships. And so when Italy switched to being on the side of the Americans, the Germans went in and burnt the ships. But they took all kinds of pictures of them. That's how big they were. They were almost as big as the Ark. What's interesting about these ships is they actually had 5 keels laid down, not just 1, 5. He had heated floors, bronze valves to adjust the hot and cold water, and, unbelievable ships. So he built that ship, and they think 4 others. 2 of them were retrieved, and they're actually searching now for another one, because they just did some underwater excavation. I think they found a 3rd one, but they haven't confirmed it. He built that ship almost as big as the Ark in 5 years. Could Noah build the Ark in 100? Piece of cake. Really, seriously. God tells him how to build it. He says, I want you to use it, build it like out of a process called gopher wood. You see how the wood goes this way, and then that way, and that way, and that way? When you talk to construction guys, they say, man, you build it like that? That's like unbelievably strong. But they didn't have little tiny wood. The concept of wood that they had is so much superior to our wood. They're in New Zealand. They're in these farmer fields, and these sections of the fields wouldn't grow crops, and they could not figure out why. They finally ended up digging down in the fields and running into these huge trees. And they said they're called ancient kauri trees. And right away, the evolutionists said, oh, they're 150,000 years old at least. Well, when they cut into them, it was fresh sawdust. It wasn't turned to stone. It wasn't rotted. They're not old. They're from the flood. They were left in the flood. Now they know there's only 3 different layers of them. And it was basically 3 getting slammed by the flood. And so they started cutting them up. The log would literally heat your house for the winter. That's the kind of boards they had to work with. That's big stuff. This is for sale, by the way. So if you need a special wood project, it's only $60,000. Oh my goodness, who's buying that thing, right? Great conference room table, I would imagine, for some unit. They had cisterns on the top of the ark. They calculated it would only take an inch of rain in those cisterns to water the animals for a full week. Water was not a problem at all. They calculated the quantity of food they would have needed, and they used the clay storage containers like have been dredged up from those ancient ships and ancient shipwrecks. And this is what they used back then. And they actually calculated the food out. They could do it in 15,000 clay containers, which would barely fill half of the first floor. That's it. And God said that every time he told Noah to do something, Noah did it. And guys, let me tell you something. When you follow what this book says, you're going to have an awesome life blessed by God. If you decide, I'm going to blow that book, I don't care, you're going to totally mess up your life. It's not to say you're never going to have challenges if you follow what this says, because you will have challenges. But God will bless your life. Let's keep going here. God calls the animals. Noah did not collect them. Very important point. Why? Because you need 2 of the dog kind with the right DNA so that you can later on breed out information. You never add it. It's never added. You breed it out, and you could create 240 breeds of dogs from breeding that information out. So God had the right 2 come down there. And on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and things died, and everything died. Now, if you were going to be made fun of for anything, it's going to be your belief in the ark. I told this story the last time I was here, but this is an important topic because if you really believe your faith like I do, people are going to go after you. So you've got to make sure you know what you believe. I was in southern New Hampshire. I was there to support a student who was doing a presentation to 90 students, a couple professors, and he was doing it on fossil evidence for the flood. So I knew his professors would go after him like no tomorrow. So I said to him, ask your professors if I could come to your presentation, and please tell them ahead of time what I do so they know who I am. So I get to the classroom, and the teacher kind of meets me at the door, and all the students are in there, and he leads me to the middle of the class. And he says loud enough for all of the students to hear, he says, so come on, do you really believe this guy made a big boat and he filled it with animals? Do you really believe that? And I said to him respectfully, so how do you believe man survived the cataclysmic event? Is that like something we need to do something about? It's okay? We're not burning down. It's getting quieter and quieter. So I said to him, so how do you believe man survived the cataclysmic event? Because evolutionists have a cataclysmic event, right? Meteorite hits, man in some form must survive. Now, it really wasn't a fair question because I already knew what answer he would give to me. And this is what he said, and this is what they say in every major university in America. He said, I believe man was in the form of a small, rodent-like mammal. In other words, man was in the form of a rat that burrowed under the ground and survived. And I said to him, so correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't your cataclysmic event last for 100,000 years? He said, yes. I said, well, just for me, I think it's way easier to believe a guy lived on a ship for a year than I was a rat under the ground for 100,000. Then I asked him an important question. Where was the rat colony found? This is the hinge moment of the survival of mankind as a rat. Kids, man was never a rat. What country was it found in? No country. What journal published the evidence of its existence? No journal, no evidence, no nothing. And yet there's over 500 ancient memories of a worldwide supernatural flood from around the world. So you know what? Stand strong. The Word of God is right. You know, it's just the rat thing is like for the birds. But anyways, oh, let's not talk about the birds. All right, so what happens? Man, this stuff gets me a little disturbed. You got all the animals made on day 6. You got man made on day 6. God says, Noah, I'm going to bring 2 of every unclean animal and 7 of every clean animal to the ark. Dinosaurs were unclean animals. They were alive from day 6. Oh, come on. Are you crazy? You think Noah brought 150-foot dinosaurs on the ark? That's crazy. Well, he didn't bring 150-foot dinosaurs on the ark because the purpose was to have babies. And kids, do grandma and grandpa have babies? No. Younger people have babies, right? Grandma and grandpa would have kept growing a 150-foot long dinosaur? No. Wouldn't have brought them, would have brought the kids. How big are the kids? Biggest egg we got is this big, so the kids are about this big. We only got 35 kinds of dinosaurs. That is it. Could Noah fit 70 animals this big on the ark? 35 times 2, okay, male and female. 70 animals are this big on the ark. Piece of cake. But when they get off the ark, what has changed? Everything. Do you guys go in the woods and see 20, 30-foot ferns? Never. The big food is gone forever, never to recover ever again. You got cold for the first time. We're going to talk about that tomorrow morning during Sunday school at 8:30. That's why God says to Noah, Noah, now there's going to be seasons. We'll get into that tomorrow. And when you look at the amber, kids, you know when you climb trees and your hands get sticky? That's tree sap. During the flood, the water was super warm coming from within the crust of the earth, and it cooked the tree sap out of the trees. And bugs got caught in there, and it turned hard, and now we call that hard tree sap amber. There's air bubbles in the amber. They took the atmosphere or the air out of those air bubbles, and they were totally shocked because it was 30 to 32% oxygen. Whoa! That's air from before the flood, 30 to 32% oxygen. Our oxygen today is 19, 20, 21%. Unbelievable. What would happen at 30% oxygen? Man, you could outrun every single gold medalist there has ever been. Your body would heal much quicker. You would live much longer. But now, the great forests never come back. The oxygen levels never recover. Their food is gone, and when you got to eat 1,000 pounds of vegetation a day and it's all gone, you got a big problem. It's cold for the first time, and they are not made to deal with cold at all. The oxygen levels drop from 30 to 20%, and they're struggling to breathe because their bodies are so big and their lungs are so small. That's why the mammoth becomes the big guy on the block. He's got a way smaller food requirement. He could deal with the cold easily, and he's got a big set of lungs compared to his body. So he becomes the big guy on the block. But you know, dinosaurs weren't the only thing that went out at that point. You don't see the ducks that are 8 feet tall anymore. You don't see the beavers that are the size of cows anymore. You don't see the dragonflies with 48-inch wingspans anymore. Every part, it seems as every biblical kind had enough variety within the DNA to allow for giantism, but the giantism, we're going to talk about giants during the David and Goliath thing tomorrow. Giantism pretty much can't survive in the big animals after the flood, reemerges in the humans after the flood. We'll get into that tomorrow. But yeah, all that stuff's gone, and they basically become a record of extinction. But you know what's the most awesome part of the story? God protects Noah. God protects Noah's wife, who believed the message from God like Noah did. God protected Noah's boys who believed the message from God. God protected the ladies who married his boys who believed the message from God. And kids, the dinosaurs are in the Bible. Let me grab my Bible. Oh, come on. I've read the whole Bible. I have never seen the word dinosaur in the Bible because it's not in there. You know why the word dinosaur isn't in the Bible? We made the word up. We invented it 100 years ago. So let's make a word up. Haruga Hagasaki. I read the Bible cover to cover. I've never seen a Haruga Hagasaki. Why? We made it up, okay? God talks to Job about the biggest land animal he ever made. Do you think God knew what the biggest land animal was he ever made? Of course, right? He calls it a behemoth. He says, Job, look at the behemoth which I made along with you, right? Same day. Land animals day 6, man day 6. His tail sways like a cedar tree. His bones are like tubes of bronze. His limbs are like rods of iron. Well, people say, wow, I think the behemoth's got to be an elephant. Is that a tail like a cedar tree? No, that's like a stick. And that's a hard picture to get. Oh, if it's not an elephant, it's got to be a hippo. Is that a tail like a cedar tree? No, that's like a twig. That's a tail of a cedar tree. These are limbs like rods of iron. Okay, God knew what the biggest land animal it was he ever made. What do we got? Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Let's say it. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Now, we're going to say it low and slow. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Now we're going to say it lower and slower. Design, disobey, disaster, deliver. Okay, pastor's practicing back there. He's getting ready. All right, now, guys, you know when we talked about the sin that Adam and Eve did? And you know how we said, how many of you guys disobey your parents? Shocked at the reaction in the front row. These pastoral children up here. They're sinners? Mine are too. And I said, how many of you are mean to your brothers and sisters? You're like, guys, that puts a big wall of sin between you and God. And you and the people that you sin against. And when Adam and Eve sinned, man, it was bad. And what's so sad, and yet you see such a loving God in this story. God comes looking for Adam and Eve. And he had walked with them in the garden and talked with them in the garden. Their relationship was like this. So awesome. And now all of a sudden that sin comes between them and they're hiding. You know what people do when they sin? They hide. One way or another, they hide. And sin always hurts them and it always hurts others. And then you read that God did something unusual. Remember, there was no death. And then all of a sudden they sinned, and God had to kill an animal and covered them with the animal's skins. That must have been a shock to them, because they had never seen death. And now God is somehow covering their sin, and they're hiding from him in shame. And so they're learning so much. And as God reveals his plan to mankind, he talks about how in the Old Testament the Israelites used to sacrifice sheep. And they actually brought the sheep into the house. Now, you guys know animals far better than me. And you know what happens when you bring an animal into the house, right? Oh, let's call it Fluffy, Fluffy. Now, why did God tell them to bring the animal into that? It's pretty amazing that, the first Passover, bring it into to have the animal in there 4 days. Because they're kind of getting to know the animal. And then they did something symbolic. They put their hands on the animal's head. And what they were showing was, it seemed like they're trying to show, like, my sin is somehow going to go into this animal, and this animal is somehow going to pay the price for my sin. But we know the animal could never pay the price for our sin. Ever. And so God comes in the form of Jesus, and man, because God loves us so much, because we're the best part of his creation, he doesn't want this sin between us and him. And Jesus dies on the cross. And he's described as a perfect sacrifice. And God took our sin, kids, and put it on him on the cross. And he literally takes the punishment and pays the penalty for our sin. And the Bible says when you figure out you're a sinner, and you figure out you got a wall of sin between you and God, you got to turn from sin. It's called repentance. You got to turn to God. And you got to ask God to forgive your sin. Now here's what's amazing. God says when he forgives your sin, it is as far as the east is from the west. Now if you look at the earth, right, you go, oh, well, here's the south, and here's the north. You go up to the North Pole, South Pole. Like you can't go any farther, right? You go east to west, you just keep going. You never get to the east. You never get to the west. He says, your sin's going to be forgiven as far as the east is from the west, to be remembered no more. And I want to encourage you, if you have never asked God to forgive your sins, it is absolutely the most important thing you will ever do. And kids, I want to encourage you that if you understand the problem of sin and you understand your need for forgiveness, you need to talk with your parents, you need to ask God to forgive your sin. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Why don't you guys close your eyes? We're just going to end up in prayer, and then we'll have some couple seconds for questions and answers. Father, I pray, Lord, for the people that are here. God, for the kids, Lord, as they are starting to understand that they are sinners. God, help them to want to ask you to forgive their sins. Lord, I pray for their parents, their grandparents. Maybe they, Lord, haven't really taken time to get to know you. And God, I just pray that you would make your love so clear to them that they couldn't miss it. I pray, God, that they would want to ask you to forgive their sins, Lord. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. 8:30, Mammoths, Ice Age, what are Neanderthals? 10 o'clock, prove Sodom and Gomorrah, prove Jericho, prove David and Goliath. Any quick dinosaur questions? No, I know this was a kid's program. So I didn't do carbon dating like I usually do with the adults. I didn't do the graves. I didn't do the soft tissues are pouring out so fast. It's the biggest area of study, and none of the soft tissues look old at all. They just took Santana Formation fish, supposed to be 152 million years old. They put them in acid, an acid bath. They took the scales off, and underneath was fillet. Not fossilized, mineralized, nothing. Fresh fillet. None of it looks old. MOR 1125, Museum of Iraqi specimen 1125, the veins stretch out and snap back. The tissue's soft. All the new finds are screaming out youth, not age. And so, but they don't want you to hear about that. But we did that the last time we were here. So questions, quick questions. Yes?
When you said when the snake was about to bite the dinosaur, how did it become fossilized really quick?
It was just instantly covered. We have all kinds of fights that are fossilized. We have a Protoceratops getting attacked by a Velociraptor, and the Protoceratops is literally biting the Velociraptor's arm, and the Velociraptor's got its claw on its stomach of the Protoceratops, and it was literally fossilized in the middle of a fight. Don't ever fight with your brothers or sisters. You never know what will happen to you. Yeah, so we got a lot of that instant stuff all over the place, tons of it. In fact, you could look up dinosaurs fighting, and you'll see tons of it, fossilized in the middle of having the fight. Pretty amazing. They sell for a lot of money, those ones. Quick questions? Yes?
A long time ago, I read that there were, I think they called them moraines, where material from the flood had gathered, and that all sorts of animals that were not supposed to have lived at the same time, their bones and remains were all mixed together in these places.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've seen documentation of that?
There's just tons of that. Repeat the question. Yeah, are there mixtures of bones that are from different levels and different places and you know, all the time? One of the biggest finds in the last couple months was up in a mine in Alberta, Canada. And the mine was full of plesiosaurs. And it's a big sea creature. Tons of them. And it's pouring out of that mine. All of a sudden, they run into a nodosaur, which is like if you took a military tank, armored it, dropped it onto 4 feet, that's a nodosaur. Well, what's a nodosaur doing at the bottom of the ocean? Now, here's what's amazing. They pulled the nodosaur out. The spikes were unbelievable, and our fingernails are made of keratin, and that's not going to last. The back of the dinosaur, all the spikes covered with keratin, all looks young. So yeah, the mix is undeniably a flood. Undeniably. I mean, clearly.
One more question.
Yes. Okay, let me talk a little bit more about the layers here. When you look at the fossil record, you see trilobites at the bottom. They're wiped out first because they're living at the bottom of the ocean. It's not because they're somehow going to evolve spines later on or any vertebrae. Or it's not. It's because they couldn't get away. That's why they're at the bottom. You see fish next. They could get away for a while, but then they're covered. You see slowest moving land animal. And it's not because the trilobites grew a spine. That's the evolutionists say, the spine. No, it's because they couldn't get away. Then you see the slowest moving land animals, man, bats, and birds at the top because they have the brains and the ability to get away. So yeah, those layers are actually how the flood is taking them out, the different environments as they go. In fact, you see the long necks first because they're in the areas. They can't go up into the woodlands where the Triceratops will go because they're too big. Mm-hmm. So you see the long necks first, then the Triceratops. It's actually the flow of the flood, layer after layer. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm working on a footprint area right now from a 28-foot dinosaur. The footprints are so perfect, it's almost beyond comprehension. There's no weathering in anything. You can see the wrinkles on the bottom of their feet. And the tree limbs go east to west, and the next layer up, they go north to south. Next layer up, east to west. Next layer up, north to south. And the evolutionists look at that and they go, why did that happen? And I bring kids there, and the kids look at the layers, and the evolutionists will say, well, the mud lays out, and the dinosaurs step in the mud, and the mud comes the next year, and the dinosaurs step in the mud. And the kids look at it and go, there's no weathering in any layer at all. They're not laying out for a year. That guy's wrong. And the tree limbs are getting laid out east to west as the flood surges over the continent. And then as the tidal wave comes back, it hits what we now call the Connecticut River Valley, and it turns the tree limbs north to south because it's going out the river. Coming east to west, going out north to south. Believe the flood, everything you see makes sense. Yeah. So you had another question?
Yeah, these boulders that they say are the size of houses
Yeah.
on the scablands, scattered across the scablands, do you think that's from the flood too?
Yeah, probably.
And
I mean,
but it's
the
like
boulders on the
nobody
top.
ever thinks of that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple. The flood's happening in stages.
Yeah.
So, and then you got an ice age. And so some of the boulders are getting jammed down as the ice age moves down and
Yeah.
deposits the till.
Yeah.
But some of them are being exposed during what we call the erosion stage.
Okay.
So when you look at the big plateaus, they're called hodus or whatever, they're always dead flat on the top. That's like the end of the flood.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you see this massive erosion between them.
Yeah.
That's all the erosion stage. So sometimes those big boulders are uncovered during the erosion stage,
So
and the
these-
stuff's all swept away.
These are like as if where it says God opened up the fountains of the
Yeah.
great deep and things blew out, and all I can think of is that, that these immense boulders were just thrown across the landscape.
Oh yeah, I mean, geologically speaking, it's the biggest catastrophe you can imagine. And it amazes me that a lot of these doctorates in geology, they never even raft the Grand Canyon. It's unbelievable. And I have hostile people coming after me all the time. I had a guy, I was up in Barre, Vermont, and 2 kids rented their high school auditorium, public school. They wanted to do an outreach, and I met with 6 kids. They only thought 6 kids were Christians in the high school. It's a very liberal state, Vermont. So we're kneeling down, praying, asking the Lord to bring 150 people. They thought if 150 people came, that'd be like totally amazing. Like 750 people came. It was the biggest crowd they ever had. We outdid what was in their dramas. When they put on dramas, we got more people. What about 13 or 14 people come to Christ? But at the end, everybody had left but about 100 people. And I'm taking down my computer, and this guy comes right up on stage, and he's steaming mad. And he says to me, I am the lead engineer for the state of Vermont. I have a doctorate in geology. So I said, awesome. And while he's telling me this stuff, I'm backing up to the pictures of those straight lines. I said, with a doctorate in geology, you could certainly tell me why the lines are so straight. There's 100 people listening to him. This is what he said. I felt really bad for him because it was a complete failure. Yeah, geologically speaking, it is a catastrophe that laid down those layers. In fact, when they're just examining the sand that is in the Coconino layer, and now they don't know what to do because they discovered the granules match the sand in the Appalachian Mountains. And so when the Appalachian Mountains were coming up, it literally, the flow was taking the top of the Appalachians off and depositing it in what is now the Coconino 1,400 miles away from each other. And see, they can't explain that stuff. So, in the middle of what's called the red wall limestone, the thickest layer, they found what's called an orthoceras. There's like tubes with these layers in them. There's millions of them facing all one direction, northwest. Millions in the middle of the layer. So evolutionists say that's a calm, placid sea. You don't get a calm, placid sea. Millions of 5-foot tall, they're called nautilites, but they're related to orthoceras. All tilted one direction? No. That's clearly flood. That's why they try to deny our permits. When we pull a permit to go study it, they try to deny our permits because the more you study it, the more you see that the flood really happened. That we're now studying the bends. When you look at the bends that are in the Grand Canyon, they all bent wet. If they had bent dry over time, they would have fractured. They're not fractured. They're all wet bends. So yeah, I love this stuff. It's so Okay, anybody else got a question? I'm around tomorrow, so I'll be here. My wife knows a ton, so my wife's Judy right there. Judy, put up your